This is it. This is when Colorado was supposed to have its most vulnerable vaccinated. Let's look at how we're doing. Denver gets some flexibility from COVID restrictions, but can't loosen them yet. I wonder if we've been tallying the vaccine totals in the wrong way. We'll go in depth on that. Colorado is sending National Guard to Washington. What about the threat here next week? And the awkward but essential conversation about pay equity, asking people how much they make.
The fact that you both like fantasy football is not a reason to pay a man on your team more than you pay a woman.
Getting paid equally requires some scouting. We'll talk about how to do it next. Denver is close enough to a return to indoor dining we can taste it. Got approved for the state's 5-star program, but Denver's COVID counts are still too high. So now the city's restaurants have to wait even longer until those cases drop. Mayor also mentioned today that he wants the incoming President Biden to give cities more control over who gets vaccinated when, so that Denver might be able to prioritize people in group living situations, like in homeless shelters. Statewide, our vaccination progress is plodding along. Not yet 4%. It's better than some other states, but between you and me, have you seen some of these other states? So we are at 3.9% right now, vaccinated another 11,000 Coloradans yesterday. We're almost to 250,000 people total. So the state's goal has been to get through most of the initial phase, the most vulnerable people, by right about now. Our Anusha Roy looks at how we're doing with Phase 1A.
Phase 1A includes the highest risk healthcare workers and staff and people living in long-term care facilities. Let's start with a check-in at hospitals like Denver Health.
We have vaccinated at least 80% of our employees, our frontline employees.
This is for employees receiving the first dose. Now the hospital system is looking to their next step.
We have to do more outreach to our 70-year-olds and above.
The state is hoping by the end of February, 70% of Coloradans 70 and older will be vaccinated.
Is that realistic?
I think it can be done.
A big challenge is not always knowing how many doses Denver Health will get week to week. For a look around the state, the Health One system said they are on track for Phase 1A for their healthcare workers. The CEO of Lincoln Community Hospital in Hugo said for the staff there, anyone who asked for a vaccine received one and will start administering second doses next week. The Colorado Hospital Association helped with the big picture, saying last week it estimated more than half of the hospital workforce in the state had been vaccinated, and that number should be higher this week. It also said some hospitals need additional vaccines, while others have been able to move on to Phase 1B. As for long-term care facilities, things have gone well for Vivage Senior Living.
All of our Colorado communities have been scheduled for a vaccine clinic.
This is a part of the distribution plan being done through a partnership between the feds, CVS, and Walgreens, which state officials have expressed their frustration because they don't feel like it's going fast enough. According to the state, the goal is for CVS and Walgreens to be done with administering first doses in skilled nursing facilities by January 16th and finished giving first doses for assisted living facilities by January 31st.
So just like you, we want more details on that, especially because we've heard from so many of you guys concerned about this part of the vaccine distribution. I actually got a call back from the State Department of Health late in the evening, in like the last 25 minutes, and we're going to be going over the latest data, how many facilities are scheduled, how many are not. As soon as I can sort through those updated numbers, I'm going to push that out to everyone, Kyle.
So all of this, Anusha, it seems to be about flexibility. Everybody on the ground wants flexibility. Mayor of Denver wants flexibility. Governor wants flexibility. And individual health systems like Denver Health also want some flexibility.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And you know what they were saying today was, you know, the system they had in place, you know, on the day one of vaccine distribution, it's morphing over time. And so one of the things that they are working on is reaching out to clinics that are maybe not affiliated with them, but struggling to get the vaccines. They want to pair up to help them get access to vaccines. And a big question from people, you know, right now, Denver Health's focus is 70 and up, Denver Health patients. They said as soon as they get the infrastructure to be a little bit patient, they're going to be opening that out to non-patients. We watched UC Health, Boulder Community Health do the same already.
Yep. Frequent question we get here is, who do I go to if I'm not with one of the big health providers? All right, Anusha Roy, reporting from the Brick House. Colorado's hospitalization numbers seem to have plateaued, which is not great because they're at a level where they're going to continue to strain the healthcare system if we can't get them down more. 822 patients, up a few from yesterday, down a few dozen from this time last week. We feel pretty confident saying that we have passed December's peak in deaths per day. I know we mention this every time the death toll comes up. Because of the fact that deaths are tallied and reported days or weeks after the fact, we have to look a ways back in order to get an accurate number. They have not dropped off like you see at the edge of that graph. Around Christmas time, we were averaging 41 COVID deaths per day. My colleague Chris Vanderveen tracks those numbers daily, and he says Colorado's vaccination effort is good, not great.
If you look at where Colorado is compared to other states, we're doing pretty well. And I think the governor likes to rely on where Colorado is in other states, and really that's a fair assessment of where the state is right now. But when you look at just simply where Colorado is and where Colorado needs to be, it's still rather daunting, and not much has changed over the last week. There is more vaccine going to more places, but as we've been reporting for the last week or so, there really is this holdup in certain people that are in that 1A that really need to get vaccinated, and they're just not getting vaccinated yet. That was a story a week ago. It's gotten better now, but there's still more progress to be made.
When we talk about the percentage of Coloradans who are vaccinated, and it creeps up through the single digits, it occurs to me that maybe we ought to be lending the perspective that that's not a number that we're ever going to get to 100, nor is that the plan. I mean, just take folks who are 16 and younger. They can't get the vaccine now if they wanted it. So those people aren't going to be in that equation.
Yeah, I think what you're trying to see from the state is that in any given age category, and now right now it's really the focus is on 70 and above, is that you get 70%, 80% of that group to sort of buy in to get the vaccine. And at that level, there is general acceptance within the scientific community that you'll have essentially effective herd immunity that's really going to slow down the spread dramatically. But as we've talked about before, keep in mind, if you get 70% of the people who are 70 and older to buy in and get a vaccine, really you start to wipe away the primary concern in terms of people who are ending up in the hospital, people that are getting primarily the most sick, and the people who are most dying.
My full conversation with Chris is on the next YouTube channel. There we talk about America's kind of general lack of preparation for this vaccination rollout, even though we knew it was coming. Talk about what we should be better prepared for, say, 1 year from today. So I've been covering politics for more than a decade, and this is the first time that I remember us ever asking elected officials this question. Do you feel safe? Do you feel protected if the pro-Trump mob returns to the U.S. Capitol with even greater numbers? Do you feel safe from other House members who stoked the insurrection and who want to have weapons inside the Capitol?
Do you feel safe?
Well, I'm looking outside my window right now, and I have 8 National Guardsmen standing on my street corner. The level of security we're seeing right now in Washington is the level of security that they normally will have around an inauguration. And what they've done, they've put it into place a week early.
I think the events of the past week have made many of us in the House, and I think public servants across the country, frankly, question their own safety. And that's certainly something that I've thought about. But at the end of the day, look, the more important question, in my view, has to be, are we prepared to ultimately do our duty and to fulfill our constitutional oath? And that, to me, is an easy question, and the answer has to be in the affirmative.
It's just so strange and so apocalyptic looking, to see all the troops outside the Capitol. Colorado's governor announced late this afternoon that our state is going to send at least 200 National Guard members to Washington to join the thousands of troops that are already there to secure the inauguration. Democratic Governor Jared Polis had previously told us that Colorado's Guard would be activated here at home if there's violence at the Capitol. We were thinking maybe before would be a good idea. FBI's warned about that potential. Today, his office, in their statement about sending the Guard to D.C., said that they do have a plan to make sure Colorado sites are protected as well.
Equal pay for equal work. It's not that complicated.
It's really not. Though finding out what other people make so you can compare your own pay, that's tough. A change in Colorado law is supposed to make it easier. Denver's architectural history pinpoints where a lot of powerful people once stood, not necessarily those who built the city over centuries. A chance to fix that next. Asking somebody how much they make, even a friend, I mean, there's a question that's slathered in awkward sauce. A new state law aimed at equal pay for equal work has created new ways for people to reveal salaries and disparities in salaries, particularly to help women so they can make sure they're being paid fairly for the same work. Politics guy Marshall Zellinger looks at how to approach this uncomfy topic.
Hi, I'm Bob. I make $100,000. I have the same education and responsibilities as Wendy. How much do you think she makes?
It was 5 years where I felt that something was off.
Wendy Rockwell is a success story in fighting for equal pay.
I was probably being paid anywhere from $50,000 to $80,000 less than my colleagues.
A new law that took effect this year would have made her investigation into inequality a bit easier.
You couldn't go and tell your boss, hey, Bob said he's making $50,000 more than me. What gives?
No, because then I would have violated the company policy of not discussing.
She quietly talked with coworkers about salary when it was taboo. Her company was bought out and the new bosses made good.
Within 6 months, they've increased it by $50,000 for me doing the same job.
Colorado's new equal pay for equal work law takes some of the secrecy away from salaries.
It's very clear that you're protected from retaliation if you talk to your coworkers about what they're being paid.
Rachel Ellis runs Livelihood Law, an employment law firm, and she helped write some of the equal pay law, which now requires all job postings to come with salary ranges, and potential employers are no longer allowed to ask how much you currently make. The new law does not consider it discrimination if a man is paid more than a woman, or vice versa, if the employer can show the higher pay is because of a seniority system, a merit system, earnings based on quantity or quality of production, and education, training, and experience.
The fact that you both like fantasy football is not a reason to pay a man on your team more than you pay a woman.
The disproportionate inequality of pay has been for women, and more explicitly as well for women of color.
Lauren Castile is the president of the Women's Foundation of Colorado, which spent years trying to pass an equal pay law. Because based on Bob and his $100,000 salary, white females would make $78,000, African American women $63,000, Hispanic women $53,000.
Equal pay for equal work. It's not that complicated.
So you're now sitting there thinking, I'm underpaid for the same job as my coworker, what now? Well, one tip is go to human resources. Ask for an audit of employee salaries and ask around. That's okay now. You can also look for job postings from within your company and see what the salary range is posted, but talk about awkward if you don't see your salary in that range or if you're on the low end of that salary, Kyle.
You know, Marshall, it reminds me of a lot of the conversations that have been had over the years encouraging women to aggressively negotiate for salary a lot more. This is kind of a separate but related issue. It does involve people kind of stepping into that uncomfortable place to say, hey, let me see that stuff. Let me get that information. Hey, let's have a side conversation at work.
And it's perfectly okay to do that. And in 2 weeks, the Women's Foundation of Colorado is going to have a webinar to help guide anyone through this, particularly women and women of color, to help them try to get the money that they've earned and that they deserve. I'm going to put a link on the web story to that webinar.
All right, Marshall Zellinger, man, they changed the music, they changed the graphics. If they changed your glasses, that would have been too much for me. Thank you, sir.
The winds have been relentless today. We saw wind gusts topping 100 miles per hour up in the mountains, and tonight they're still going strong in the foothills with 50 to 60 mile per hour speeds leading us into early tomorrow morning. Luckily, as the afternoon rolls on, those winds start to weaken just a bit, but we'll have to wait a while till about 8 o'clock tomorrow. High wind warning continues for many of our eastern counties throughout much of the day tomorrow. High pressure is around, so it'll keep us dry here in Colorado. Temperatures seasonal, but still we have to deal with the winds. Daytime highs for us back into the mid-40s tomorrow, 40s across the eastern plains, 20s and 30s up in the mountains, and then your 7-day forecast bringing a few flurries into the mix on Saturday and then again next Monday.
A lot of the history connected to our underrepresented communities in Denver is being lost at an alarming pace due to the rapid development of our city.
Important architecture isn't just the places where the wealthy and most powerful lived and worked. A chance to preserve a more complete picture of old Denver. Next. Many of Denver's official historic landmarks were once places occupied by rich white dudes. Nothing against rich white dudes. They did some pretty good stuff. But now the city's working on a project to preserve places where other important Denverites once lived and worked.
A lot of the history connected to our underrepresented communities in Denver is being lost at an alarming pace due to the rapid development of our city. My name is Jenny Buddenborg, and I'm a senior city planner with Community Planning and Development in the Landmark Preservation Program. The Denver Latino Chicano Historic Context Study will provide a broad historical overview on the citywide settlement and development patterns of Denver's Chicano and Latino communities and the historic places associated with that history. And we have already designated some of those places. For example, Casa Mayan on the Auraria campus. Some of the other history that we're well aware of that hasn't really been preserved or maybe recognized are those related to the 1960s and 1970s Chicano movement in Denver. Plaza de la Raza, for example, or West High School, where a number of the walkouts were staged by students. And associated with that is the adjacent La Alma Lincoln Park neighborhood. And it's the stories about those places, that things that occurred there, the attachments that people have to those places that really create the significance for them. And so when something comes up like a demolition, for example, we can know whether or not that place is important and is one that we need to preserve. So we really want to listen and learn from Denver's Latino Chicano communities about their history and the places connected to them, because there's a lot that we just don't know. And that, at the end of the day, is the whole purpose of this, is to really understand that full history so that we have it down, we know what it is, and so we can take the next steps then to preserve it.
And engraved cross on the church was really cool. The city hopes to wrap up the project by the end of the year, and then they expect to work on projects documenting historic architecture for Denver's African American and Asian and American Indian history as well. So you all spotted some real dedication by people determined to get up skiing with less than optimal equipment at hand. That and your feedback about guess what next. The most Colorado thing we saw today is always a Subaru with skis on top, but that's getting boring, so here are some other close contenders. Bluebird Ski Day will bust out the classic convertible and just let the skis flap in the breeze. Serena saw that on the way to Dillon. For those upgrading from the Subaru after some success in life, the Lambo is always an option. I would not think of that as a ski trip friendly vehicle, but Julia saw one cruising along 32nd in Denver with the ski topper on it. That's a good look right there. They're probably headed for Aspen. And you know we had to throw in a motorcycle, have to have a motorcycle. And you got the skis on there too, whatever it takes to get to the slopes. Ray spotted this in Fair Play. Keep the most Colorado things you see coming our way. Blue writes in tonight to tactfully say, what is this bull bleep theme song, This Isn't Next? Courtney, has the next music changed permanently? If so, I like it. Nothing's ever permanent. Rob and Tracy and Breck say, every now and then, maybe can you open up with the old theme? You'll hear the old theme from time to time when we see you next time.